Beautiful. Everyone take their seats?
Yeah.
You want to do that?
Oh, bless you.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do a nice breaker just to kind of grab it? Or? Yeah. Well, there you go. You don't need to know.
Kia ora koutou. Te lofa lava, malolele, warm Pacific greetings. Welcome to your second preliminary session of this hui. We hope you've enjoyed the kai and the kōrero during the previous sessions. Thank you once again to the Ministry of Education and the Canterbury West Coast Secondary Schools Principals Association for their support with funding these things. No otatahi aho, he kaiako ho i te irira o kahukura, ko Burgess Nordea toku whānau, ko Kendra toku ingoa. Hello, my name is Kendra. I am the Treasurer for Waitaha English. I am a teacher at Cashmere High School. I hope you've been having an enjoyable day at our Accord Day, learning, connecting with all your fellow kaiako in this community. Over the last few hours, you've had the opportunity to ask questions, raise concerns that you might have with the changes coming to Level 1. We're now going to move into another aspect of the change package. Key part of this program is opening your eyes and creating discussions around mana orati mō te mātauranga Māori. Before we get into that and introducing some of our speakers, as a member of the Waitaha Committee, it is my responsibility to promote the opportunities you have to connect with us. We have an Instagram, we have a Facebook, we have a pretty decent website, and we have our emails. Around the venue, there are a few posters of things that we do. First 4 years group, head of faculty, head of department groups. These are groups who are really keen to get running again, but we rely on you as the community of teachers to come together, so there are strength in numbers. So please, if you are on any of those platforms, like us, follow our pages, stay up to date because there is more to come.
Mahalo lava soifua malangi mama veia lok nei leo whatau vae whai masui le matanga luenga o le ministry. Mātou te whatalo whatu i o tō susunga whai a onga, mapule a onga, whawhtai alo tō tala ao mai masu mai le nei aso a wale tātou mata upu. Ngā mihi mahana ki a koutou. I think just to maybe make the space a bit more mawhana for our awesome guest speakers that we've got coming up this afternoon. I wonder if I can invite you after our post-carbs loading at lunchtime to pop our hands together like so, and we'll rub it. And it's kind of like this interactive thing that we do in Pacific Spaces, you might have seen. And we'll mili, and then I'll say patia, which is one clap. Patia, patia. And then lua pati, which is 2 claps. Lua pati, lua pati. And then we have to be quite coordinated, and I'll say totolufa, which is, let's try that, totolufa. Nice. Then I'll say, we do kind of this thing of call and response, and I'm teaching you this because we're going to do this as another way to welcome our keynote that I'm about to introduce. I'll say, hey, hey, and you reply, ho. Hey, hey. Ho. Hey, hey. Ho. Okay, one more really loud after lunch. Hey, hey. Ho. Awesome. I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Phyllis Callaghan. And we're really big on honouring our speakers, Dr. Callaghan, so indulge me if you will as I read your incredible bio, because it's really important that we honour you and the incredible mahi and your ancestors that you bring onto this space. Before I read your bio, just want to pay respect to mana whenua as the enduring custodians of this land upon which we stand. We recognise sovereignty was never ceded, and honour with gratitude their sacred and spiritual connection over Aotearoa. We are all here so blessed to call Aotearoa home and honour our role as tangata tiriti to support tino rangatiratanga and exist in good relation with our Indigenous whanaunga, past, present and future. Tihei mauri ora. Our first speaker, Dr. Phyllis Callaghan, is an educator, Indigenous researcher, scriptwriter, publisher and game creator. of Ngai Tahu, Te Rakato, Ngāti Porou. And please, can we hear Chihu if you whakapapa there? Ruapani and Whānau Apanui. Dr. Callahan is a leader in innovating education. She sits on the RAPLD panel, was the winner of the Emeritus Professor Roger Green Top Thesis Award in 2017 and valedictorian, CEO and owner of MSH Limited and international award-winning video game Kātuku Island. For today's kaupapa, Dr. Callahan will share the award-winning Whakairo program, which won the 2015 Prime Minister's Supreme Teaching and Learning Awards. The program is now responsible for 20 kura whakairo throughout Aotearoa and celebrates tuakana teina as one of its critical areas for success. All right. Cool. As the 2021 winner of APEC Best Women's Business and Practice for Indigenous Community Support, co-creator and co-chair of the IGDA, which is the International Gaming Development Association, recent winner of 2 silver awards for Best Game and Best Innovation at the New York Video Gaming Awards for Kātuku Island, and a finalist in this year's MWDI National Business Awards, we are very proud to present to you a fantastic speaker to start this session. And just like we did the warm-up before, Christchurch, mili, 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 patia, patia, lopati, lopati, Zozolfa, Zozolfa, hey, 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 hey. Let's give Dr. Phyllis Callahan a warm Christchurch welcome to the stage.
Tēnā rā tātou katoa, mihi nui ki te mana whenua o tēnei rohe i a Ngai Tahu. Koutou katoa I hara mai ki tēnei hui, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Just a slight change, the whakairo pedagogy is our pōpō, but as an English teacher, I thought that I'd stick with the kaupapa, and we'd look at English through a Māori lens. So that's going to be the kōrero, the kaupapa of my kōrero today. So ko waiau, ko tākuta Phyllis Callahan ahau, ko taupiri te maunga, ko horauta te waka, ko kōpu āwhara te awa, ko ngai te rākato tōku marae, ko ngai te rākato tōku tūpuna, ti he mauri ora. Firstly, as Māori, that is my pipiha. It's a way of giving my whakapapa or letting you know, who am I? So, ngā kaiako from Ngai Tahu, you're not saying, ooh, who is this whakahihi person that's coming onto our whenua? E hara. So this is where I hail from. This is my ao. This is my whakapapa. This is what I shared with my students who I taught over 15 years. So our first bit of land there is where I live in Gisborne, and that whenua belongs to Te Aitanga a Mahaki, which is a paramount iwi in the rohe of Turanga, Gisborne. The second photo here of that beautiful moana down below is Mahia Peninsula. You might know it with Rocket Lab, but that's where I was brought up and I lived for most of my childhood. And the above photo is the land that I married into. Pretty good tāne, eh? He gave me some more land by the ocean. And he was whānau Apanui. So I always mihi to him because he was also a practitioner and a teacher of whakairo who sadly passed in 2018. Okay, so now to work this PowerPoint. Bear with me. So the history, just to sort of give you a background in what my background's in and where I come from, as our wonderful speaker touched on before, winner of top thesis there at the top, 15 years in the trenches. Felt like it too. Someone said to me when I decided to get out of teaching, someone said to me, but Fire, you're like a lieutenant. And I said, okay, that's really nice. But, you know, I think sometimes, even though it's hard and the going is tough, if you think about yourself like a lieutenant And sometimes you are needed in the position that you're in to make a change in people's lives. So when the going gets tough and sometimes you don't feel like getting up in the morning and things aren't going so well at school, just say to yourself, I'm a lieutenant and my soldiers need me. Ka pai? Going down, owner of CEO, Murray Sam Holdings Limited. So we do a whole lot of research and technological developments in that space. Also under Callaghan Innovation in terms of world first for our video game Kātuku Island, which was also founded because of the huge literacy problems that Māori were having in the education system. But we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. RAPLD panel, yep, and it goes on. So we're going to flick to the next slide and start the business of the day. So in everything that I learned in my 15-year teaching history, in particular within the subject of English, I had some really despondent Māori and Pacifica students that just didn't want to do anything with English. And of course, because I was the only Māori in an English department, all the Haututu kids and all the students that were well below where they needed to be, they said, oh, Mrs. Callaghan loves all those students, let's give them to her. But what they didn't realize was that was such a privileged space to be in, because I thought I was doing those students a favor. Well, they were doing me a favor. They taught me to not only be a good teacher, but an excellent teacher. And they taught me to never, ever give up on one single student. I had one student who came to me, and the DP said, just shove him in a corner. You know, he's had so much loss, he's had so much trauma, he's not going to engage with you. So, you know, maybe he might take something in every day that he comes into your class, and we'll be happy with that. Well, so I did my teaching and, you know, came in from try to authenticate my students' world, whatever it was. And this is the important thing. Yes, mana orite is important, but also we have a whole lot of Māori students that are disenfranchised and dislocated from that mana orite. Urbanisation means that a lot of our students have moved away from that whakapapa and those connections. And that's why it is critical to understand how well do you know their world. Because mana orite is not going to fix a student in English that does not know their whakapapa and does not know their pipiha. So they may have no knowledge of that world at all. But there might be another world that you can authenticate. I taught for many years gang students. So I taught students that came from the mongrel mob and students that came from the Black Power. And every single student that came across my classroom was important. And it was about authenticating their world. Now I got told, I don't know whether we should be doing that. You know, I'm not too sure. They may bring some stories in that, you know, it may not be good. The thing is, if you don't authenticate their world and you don't let them bring their proper noun to your English class, or their adjective, or their metaphor, or their simile, whose world and what knowledge base are they drawing on? I met a student whose father was the president of the mongrel mob, and he told me, when I said, well, tell us about Dad. Oh, miss, he's a tōtara tree. I said, elaborate, tell me some more. Oh, miss, there's never ever a moment where, you know, he doesn't have kai on our table. You know, when we're down or we're sad, it's Dad who picks us up. You know, he helps Mum about the house. So there was his proper noun. There was his piece of creative writing. And that's what I'm saying. So he has all this knowledge base. Yeah, but if we're being a little bit discriminate about what we're allowing into our English classes and we're ignoring those lived experiences and those codified ways of knowing and doing, How does he authenticate his proper noun? Is that making sense with everybody? Yes. Are you sort of getting that? So whilst we have the mana orite, yes, absolutely, pepeha, and I realise it's all about Māori storytelling, but also remember, they're not the only Māori students that need to be served in kura aoraki, or mainstream kura. So along with our students who are disenfranchised, we also have students that know their pepeha and know their whakapapa. And that's what the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slides attest to. So some of them really good at carving. Is carving literacy? Absolutely, yes. The symbolism, the interpretation, the stories, the adjectives that come with ngā kura huna, so the hidden messages within the practical boards on the left-hand side here, right-hand side here, are absolutely amazing. And if you don't think that whakairo is literacy, then maybe that's an area that you can upskill on, because there's a whole whare wānanga worth of literacy within whakairo. The top slide was a young man who was a rugby player. He had trouble with literacy. He was probably at level 2 at year 9 when he should have been processing at level 4. But what he knew about was his small township of Tikaraka. And what he knew about was his awa, was his river that his whānau had swum in for years. And what he knew about was all his horses that he used to ride. And what he knew about was his mama. He was a twin to, he had a twin sister, and his mother, she had been his rock. So when literacy was allowed to be taken to his whānau, and his marae, and his mama, and his awa, at no time at all, he soon got up to level 4. So it's about knowing what, that's why tōku ao is my world. As teachers, how well do you know your students' world? How well do you know their names? My daughter, her name is Rongomai, and I get furious when people can't say her name properly, nor do they know what it means. She's at UCOL at the moment. Rongomai is a shooting star. Boy, I could tell you, I could write a piece of creating on that kupu, Rongomai. But have you asked your students, what does your name mean? Have you asked them, what's in the power of your name? Have you asked them, tell me about that shooting star in the heavens that pops off every so often? So authenticate my world. Don't make me shelve my world. Learn to authenticate it. And I tell you what, when you get trust from Māori students, it's not about them earning your trust. It's about you earning their trust. Open up their world. Don't be afraid to walk into their world. Learn about it. And I tell you what, you actually get knowledge as well. So it's reciprocal. So the next point, the second slide there about the young man poking his tongue out. So that was about the Māori Battalion, and there's a book that Monty Suter, Monty Suter put out, and the 4 men in the photo, only 3 of them returned. So that young man put himself in their position as a 17-year-old, and he did his whole, another boy, year 11, should have been processing around level 6, only processing about level 4. So I took them to the museum one day, and I showed them, we've got this beautiful, sweet sea company which is set up alongside our museum, and it's got photos of all the brave young men and women that gave their lives in the Second World War. Well, he recognised that one of them was one of his tupuna. So he did this beautiful piece of creative writing around his tupuna. And he understood when we took him there, when he saw the photos, when he learnt about his world and he began to authenticate it through his tupuna's world, something amazing happened. Yet he began to see it through his tupuna's eyes. And actually, he learnt to love English a lot better, and he wasn't so haututu for me. And at the end of the year, he passed his NCEA level 1. So if you learn anything from today, just remember, tōku ao, tōku ao, tōku ao. Authenticate your students' world. What proper noun do they come with? What adjective do they come with? What metaphor do they come with? What simile do they come with? I tell you what, Māoris have a sense of humour, you know. I asked one of my students one day, we were doing simile, you know, and he likened his auntie to an elephant. And I said, oh, you know, that's treading on pretty precious ground. But that's what I mean. When you learn about their world, you can laugh with them. It can be a really transformational journey. So don't fear it, you know, embrace it. Hey, don't shelve me, unpack me, learn with me. So once again, what's that? What's those 2 words I want you to leave with today? If you don't remember anything else, tōku ao, kia ora. So this wonderful book here, which took up most of my life, my doctoral studies, I just wanted to share a little bit about it because it might just help you understand when unpacking Māori students, you know, what they enter your classroom with, and maybe to make the environment inclusive and non-discriminant. So what the 15 interviews uncovered, so I did a study between New Zealand and Murdoch University Aboriginal students and Torres Strait Islander students. The 15 out of 15 former students had experienced layers of trauma during primary and secondary schooling. Loss and racism were the highest thematic negative codes for all interviewees. There was not one single student out of those 15 interviewees that hadn't experienced severe levels of racism. My point is this: before we even get to the literacy, how well is your space and yourself as a teacher or curriculum lead equipped to unpack student trauma? Because they're going to present with trauma. Where inclusive and non-discriminant teaching spaces have to be a non-negotiable. I come with a backpack attached. You can either lighten it or load me up. So there's the analogy there. If you can imagine a backpack, yeah. I enter your classroom, students with trauma. This backpack is really, really heavy. And one rebuke, or you getting my name wrong, straight away walls go up. Straight away I'm thinking hostile environment, hostile environment. But you know, imagine a space where, oh, kia ora Timothy. Oh, kia ora, miss, you know my name. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you even say it properly, yeah. Haramai, come in, sit down. How was your homework last night? Oh, yeah, no, it was okay, miss. Oh, okay, is anything I can help you to make it better? So it's just sort of like, sometimes, what do we call it? Banter. Just a little bit of banter with students in the morning, getting their name right. Yeah, it just helps to create some really inclusive spaces that are non-discriminant. And if I come with trauma, then that's going to help me feel safe. That's going to help me look at this environment and say, this is a really, really neat space. It's inclusive. Okay, miss, I want to learn. Okay? So it's a non-negotiable because out of those 15 students, they all went back and had a second chance at learning. One of those students left school, got kicked out of school, and left, I think, with one subject, which was whakairo. He went back, he got his degree, and now he is not only tutoring, but he is one of the top artists on our video game. So when he went back to do his study, he went to the wānanga. And what he found about Te Wānanga Aotearoa was that it was safe, it was inclusive. He could be himself. So he got the prerequisites. Now he is asking me to be his supervisor on his master's. Yeah? So I think it's important that when you authenticate the world of your students, you actually give them motivation. You give them self-efficacy. Their shoulders go up. Instead of saying, I can't, they actually say, I can. And then instead of saying, oh, well, university's not for me, they start saying, what other subjects can I do that can support literacy, that can take me to university so I can go on and I can get a degree or a master's or a doctorate. When you authenticate the world of Māori, you give them the world. Yeah? And so if you want to be a transformational teacher, then learning to give them the inclusive and non-discriminant environments is key. All of those 15 students went back for a second time. And they over at Murdoch University, they have this cultural centre set up. It's called the Kaubari Centre. And that there gives students a second shot at learning. They get all the prerequisites. And then the students call it the big house. And then they go up to the big house. And the big house is Murdoch University. And I met some amazing young men and women that were actually just finishing their degree and they were going on to their masters. So there's testament that when you authenticate my world, you let me become the world. So there's some of my lovelies that I used to teach. Once you're in my trust, I'll allow you into my world. I don't know what happened there. We'll go back. I'll allow you into my world. I learn in a whānau type environment. I think it's important we get that today too. So it's about learning inside of a whānau type environment. I like talking. Got some of those students in your class? They really like to talk. Yeah? Make them come up the front of the class. Make them give a kōrero. Empower them with their talking. Use it as a gift instead of a negative. I'm a bit of a haututu. I used to allow the boys for the first 10 minutes just to go around and hoha some of their mates. They pretended that they were talking about English, I suppose. But it just kind of like helped them to sort of warm up and just sort of feel like that they were at home with their auntie or their uncles. And, you give them a little bit of a growling every now and then, but they get it. It's that whānau type environment. They all know that grumpy nanny or that grumpy auntie. You can be that. Yeah, you can be hard, but you can also be fair. But we can share in the power base as well. So, allow them too to become the teacher. Hey, the true level of mastery is when you share the power base. And believe you me, they like to be the boss. They like to be the teacher if given a chance. Allow me to teach you. I have knowledge also. The amount of stories that they used to bring to the table about pig hunting and the excitement in their eyes and, the scariness of the maunga, and all these stories would come to life. And these are students that would just sit in other classes and not say anything. So once again, it's coming back to tōku ao, authenticate my will. Let me tell you about my pig hunting. Let me tell you about that, 3-pound pig I pulled out of the bush. Let me tell you about the diving in the kina that I got on the weekend. I have knowledge also. So, mana orite, I guess, in my simple formula, is side by side. It's about equality. It's about equal power base. It's about sharing. Once again, there's that word again, tōku ao. Think of it like a marae, a collection of people with a whole lot of different narratives, a bank or vault of proper nouns, adjectives, metaphor, simile, onomatopoeia. So how well do you know me? Because if you authenticate my world, if you authenticate tōku ao, you are going to have those things, those literary parts of speech and language features. you are going to have them in abundance. Okay, that's the thing about, if you're going to shelve Māori students' codified ways of knowing and their lived experiences, what are they coming to your table with? If they don't share your interests, if they don't share your short story, if they don't share how you were brought up, what are they coming to your table with? Because that's not something that I grew up with. I don't know about that. So proper noun has no meaning to them. Adjectives have no meaning to them. They've got a whole vault, a whole bank of literary devices sitting there, and some teachers then, they shelve it and they give them something totally foreign that they have no interest in, that they have no experience in. Straight away, war goes up. Straight away, I'm bored. Straight away, I'm causing trouble. Yep, straight away, I'm talking to my mate. Straight away, this is boring. The next day, I don't want to go to English, it's boring. Yeah? So there's a challenge for you. Make English for your students not boring. Simple. How do you do that? Tōku ao. Yeah? How do you do that? What's in your name, rungo mai? So once again, tōku ao. Literacy through a Māori lens. I am an interconnected highway of rich schema, codes, experiences, hybrids of mastery and excellence, where whānau is my metonym. That's simple. You want to get Māori students succeeding, then authenticate their adjectives, authenticate their proper nouns, metaphors, simile. Unpack it, don't shelve it. Okay, tōku ao, the how, authenticate my world. Is this literacy? Absolutely. Have you bothered to ask about those beautiful two tohora on the right and the left and their significance to whānau Apanui history? What about the metaphor that those two tohora represent to my iwi, to my hapu? What about the moana that they live in? The adjectives and the metaphor and the simile about the environment that they live in. Yeah, we've got a place in Mahia just on that tohora. Literacy, absolutely, how they come up from the Antarctic and they strand themselves on this particular piece of land on the shore at Mahi Peninsula. And their coding system dates back to thousands of years. But of course the sea has turned into land and they get confused because they want to go, it's an isthmus, so they want to sort of they have to go over, but they can't, they don't know how to, so they strand themselves in their hundreds. So if someone had told me when I was at Kura that was science, that was English, I would have been a master. Yeah, and it's the same here. If you authenticate their world, you're actually accelerating the process, the English process for them. Like so many people, there's so many issues going on with reading and writing in this country. Well, how about authenticating students' worlds? Let them bring their metaphor, let them bring their adjective, their personal pronoun. Let them bring it to the table. Let them authenticate, ko au, ko apanui, ko au. Let them tell you about their hometown surrounded by sea, forest and land, rich in history, symbolism and whakapapa. Oh, so pepeha is all about symbolism. Absolutely. Oh, and there are metaphor in your pepeha. Absolutely. Oh, and there's simile in your waiata. Absolutely. You might even find some oxymoron in there as well. Definitely onomatopoeia. So it's about allow my narrative, metaphor and proper nouns to have their own mana. Hey, that's a good kupu to remember too. How do you give mana to a personal pronoun? Anybody? I gave you the answer. Who was listening? Hey, what's that? With you authenticate my world. That's how you give mana to a proper noun, to a metaphor, and it's simple. Mana is its power, its respect, it's all those things. So when you give mana to a metaphor, you're giving it respect. You're recognizing my world. You're authenticating my world. Yep. So if ever you get stuck about, how am I going to, got a class of Māori students, how personal pronoun, just come back to that one kupu, mana. How do I give mana to those kupu? How do I give mana to literary devices? I authenticate my students' world. Ka pai? I thought about this, how could I break it down simply? And we all know that the rules and conventions of English remain the same, right? We're not looking at changing those. They stay the same for any language. So what's the change? It's my narrative that you are allowing to see the light of day. Yeah, we're not asking you to, so don't get all precious about, you're asking me to change rules and conventions. No, we're not asking that. We're just asking you to make change in terms of narrative. Let me bring my narrative into your conventions and your rules. Once again, the analogy, tōku ao. What farmer would bankrupt his crop by depriving it of water and sunlight? Māori students already have the crop, their lives, their whānau, their experiences, beliefs, customs. They already have a bank of codified ways of knowing and doing. A crop rich with adjectives, proper nouns, symbolism, metaphor, simile, verbs, nouns, imagery. Their own interconnected, woven highways of schema. Yet we bankrupt them when we make them shelve their crop or their currency instead of allowing them to unpack in a safe, inclusive, and non-discriminant space. This was an interesting story. I used to get anyone in here, you're just such a loved English teacher that you get all the first 15 players that have tried English 3 years in a row and just no luck. Yeah, I used to get truckloads of those boys, yeah. Oh, Mrs. Callahan loves all those boys. She'll get them through. But it was very, very difficult, even for first 15ers, because they didn't want to be in your class. They wanted to be either kicking a rugby ball around, or they wanted to be on a bus, or they wanted to be getting their haircuts on a Wednesday, so they needed the whole period off. Oh, miss, but you don't understand, I have to look good. We're going to be on TV this week. Forget about the English. But actually, even rugby players, you can authenticate their world. Yeah, you can, professionalism. The Super 8 is huge with schools nowadays in the secondary boys school competition. So, there's a piece of research that can be done around there. How many schools, how did it get started, et cetera. Piece of creative writing, I am a train, metaphor there, running up the paddock. And this boy, he said, Miss, I'm not very good at English, and, I'm a footy player. That's where I'm going to make my money, miss. You don't understand. I don't need English. And I said, well, sorry, sugar, in this class, you're going to get your English, because one day, I said, you might change. Your attitude might change, and you might want to go to university. So I said, let's just make sure that those boxes are ticked for you. And what he found out was that he had one of the junior students was an amazing bull rider. And guess what his name was? Liberty Valance. Even though he was Māori, his whānau named him after Liberty Balance. And it was just a really, really neat story around their whānau and how they were well known in bull riding, how many competitions they won. And this guy was only 13, and he was winning national championships. So this first 15, fella James Rutine, he went and interviewed him. And he had those connected schema, he had those connected metaphor, because bull riding is like a sport, isn't it? It's a bit like rugby. So he made those connections. He had a vault of language and literary devices that he could pull out of rugby that also could fit into bull riding. And it was such an amazing piece. I think he managed to get himself a merit. And that same young boy who said he was no good at literacy, he also did a speech for me. And believe you me, it's like pulling teeth asking 18-year-old boys to do an English speech. They just don't want to get it. They just don't want to do it. So my tactic was, Friday would come around and I knew the bus would be leaving to a first 15 game. So I would threaten to get on that bus and pull them off that bus until they did their speech. And lo and behold, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I had 3 first 15 players at my door waiting to deliver their speech. So, there's all sorts of tricks you can use around that. But once again, it's sometimes you have to probe, because sometimes when there's that lack of motivation, that amotivated learners, they haven't had success in English before, sometimes you have to do some probing, and sometimes you have to give some really good support networks, and you have to encourage them. And when it comes to, the whole setback things and resilience, you might also have to build that resilience in. Because often with amotivated learners, they just don't want to go there. The first hurdle, and that's why it's important to authenticate your students' worlds, because resilience is something that, especially nowadays in our education system with everything that's going on with COVID, our students don't have a lot of resilience. So come to that first setback, it's like, nah, it's not working for me, miss. So you have to also be an encourager. That's why it's important to know their world, because what are you going to draw on when a student says to you, nah, that's not for me. No, don't want to do it. Giving up. You have to know their world. You have to know everything about first 15 rugby. You have to say, oh, James, I saw you playing on the weekend. Oh, man, you're pretty awesome. Saw that try you scored. Oh, did you miss? Absolutely. You're showing an interest. So it's about, once again, authenticating my world, tōku ao. What do I know about James's world? How am I going to encourage him? How am I going to support him when he has that first setback to actually keep going until you get to that finish line? Ka pai? So, moving on, after spending so long in the education system and seeing just Māoris, Māori students presenting at level 2, 3, when they should have been at level 4, moving on to level 5, we decided, and my husband, he used to have a school of whakaaro, and he noticed that the literacy levels were really, really low. So he said to me, what are you going to do about it? And I said, what am I going to do about it? He said, yes, what are you going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? So we came up with a textbook called The 16-Year-Old Māori Boy. And it embraced everything about how and why Māoris learn. And we put it into this textbook. And Callaghan Innovation also recognised the unique coding systems in it and the innovation in it that no one else in the world was doing it. So that was a journey and a half, but it was knowing about tōku ao. It was authenticating these students' world and that they like to do tāmoko, for example, in English. Here's a question. Is that English? Yeah, tāmoko. Is my sleeve on my arm, is that English? Anybody? Yes, no? Absolutely. If you look at the intricacy behind the surface patterns that they use on people's skin would just blow you away. You can put a whole whakapapa, you can put a whole iwi, a narrative of an iwi on your skin, if that's what you wanted to do. But that's what I mean. It's like, just keep in mind the lens. Hey, what lens are you looking through at literacy? No one's asking you to change the rules and conventions, but we're asking you to allow the narrative, allow tōkuao into your classrooms, into your spaces. So, visual charts are in there, something that I can see. My nanny, I think the metaphor we use in the visual language chart is, my nanny is a raging bull. Oh, they got that one, they understood that. Because everyone knows what that angry nanny is like on the marae, when you run across the paipai and you shouldn't be, or you're eating when it's not time to eat. It's nanny that comes along and gives you a growling. So it's about making those connections in the visual language chart at the front of the book. Then what we did is we put all the tāmoko, we put all the whakairo in there. So you'll find that Māori students often, if you're discussing a literacy topic that they've got no interest in, have you noticed that they like to draw? Yeah? Anyway, sixth form. I had this amazing tāmoko artist and this carver. He wasn't a tāmoko artist just then. And I had this beautiful speech about creative writing and the metaphors and stuff that you needed to put in for this, to be at level 7. So after this long speech, and I gave them time, half an hour to write their beautiful pieces of creative writing, I said, Maddie, yes, miss, can I see your piece of writing, please? He put his hand across his book like this. And I said, Maddie, yes, miss, I'd like to see your piece of writing. He took his arm away, and this whole page was just this beautiful tāmoko, so intricately woven on the page. And I looked at it, and I said, Maddie, where's your piece of writing? And he goes, but miss, look what I have for you. I have this beautiful tāmoko. And I said, yeah, where's this going? He goes, miss, if you look at this, you have a 600-word creative writing piece. I mean, how can you argue with that, right? The very thing that I guess I authenticate my world, I was telling him to do. Well, he was doing it. So throughout the 16-year-old Māori boy, the tool recognises Māori intrinsic impetuses. Yep, so just things that get me really, really motivated, that keep me locked into English, which connect to student codified ways of knowing and doing. Once we authenticate metaphors, symbols, adjectives, imagery within our own ways of knowing and doing, we begin to master inferencing, widen our analysis skills, and then begin to acquire the ability to process better and understand language and its universal capabilities. This, of course, leads to agency and autonomy. The whole thing about reading is, my theory on this is that if they don't know what an adjective is, if we're not authenticating an adjective from their world or personal pronoun, then written text has no value to them. But if they understand that personal pronoun is an uncle, tame wairo, who's nurtured them, who's sheltered them, then it has meaning. So when I'm reading a text and I see a name, personal pronoun in there, it has meaning. I get it, I understand it. I'm more inclined to engage in that text. So that's what the 16-year-old Māori boy uncovered. And by the way, it is a metaphor. It's for anybody of any age. It's for girls, it's for boys. But my husband gave it that name because he said this is the population that suffers the most in terms of literacy. So that's how it got its name. We were asked to change it, but we said no, because this has a narrative behind it. This has a story with it that we didn't want people to forget, and that was a 16-year-old Māori boy. And so, when you authenticate my world, I just gave this example because I visit schools, and one of the young men, he told me about his name. And this is how he set up his board for his whakairo. And he was also going to then take it across and use it in English as a static image. But one of the things that I was most, I just kind of went, wow, even though I knew it, is he told me about his name. Te Atapo, meaning in English, midnight blessing. And there was a whole history that came with his name and his tupuna and his father and how they had carried that name on for generations. And I thought, wow, if I didn't ask, yeah, Te Atapo wouldn't have seen the light of day with me. Instead, I asked, yeah? I gave him that space to ask about his name. And I just heard such a beautiful narrative. And I said to him, this is so awesome. Can I have a copy? Can I share it? And he said, absolutely, Mrs. Callahan. And then another kōtiro at that school, she did her static image on a piece that she carved. And it was all about one of her tupuna and how they had given their life during the Second World War in the Māori Battalion. And all those patterns helped to give the meaning of sacrifice, yeah, and death, and the huge price that they paid to keep us safe. So is whakaaro literacy? Absolutely. Okay, and we all know who this guy is. If you don't, it's Ian Taylor. And he was really, really inspired with the 16-year-old Māori boy. He said he was blown away by it. And he said to me, damn, Phyllis, I wish that this was available when I was at kura. He told a story at one of the workshops that we did, how he was hit on the head or something for bringing his narrative or his language into the class. He wasn't allowed. And he said, if only they had let me do that at that time, he said, I would have got to where I was going much quicker. You know, and I mean, he's already done amazing stuff. He's a world leader. But he said, if only they had authenticated my culture at 16 years of age, imagine where I could be now. Yeah. Okay, authenticating our own cultural literacy through the tool. So in the 16-year-old Māori boy, it authenticates the Māori world through whakaaro. So we tell literacy through whakaaro. A form of literacy that is being recognised and authenticated in the 16-year-old Māori boy. And again, our taumoko artists, pretty amazing. And there's a whole narrative behind that. You could write, honestly, you could write a 5,000 word essay just on that design alone. Yeah, and there's so many different literary topics and subjects that it can cover. You name it, creative writing, research. It's just, it's an essay in itself. And that was done by one of our students, Javan Bettis, who is now a full-time tāmoko artist, but he's also one of the lead developers on our game, our video game, Kātuku Island. Okay. So just a little story and a video I'm going to share, one of two. When it clicks and our worlds come together, literacy is not the only byproduct. Yep. So there's all sorts of byproducts, technology, business, partnerships. So 5 of the artists that have designed Kātuku Island, which is the first Indigenous world video game throughout the world, from start to finish, that is now available and free, by the way, because we didn't want anyone to have any barriers to access, on Microsoft, Apple, and Android. So you can download it for free. 5 of the artists on here, the main artists, are all ex-students. So they weren't so good at literacy. They were guns at whakaaro, so they took those skills, tāmoko, and now I think the wonderful pedagogy behind all of that is that they are now my business partners. Yep. So from ex-students, through teaching relationships, through inclusive, non-discriminant environment, these boys are now leading the world with the first ever Indigenous video game. And by the way, this game has just taken out, in March of this year, it took out 2 New York Awards for best game and best innovation. So imagine, and if you go, let's just say, visualize yourself in 5 to 10 years' time, and you did away with the non-discriminant teaching spaces. You made your classrooms inclusive, non-discriminant. Every student you taught could reach for the world, whether they were Māori, Pacifica, English, Vanuatuan. By the way, just a reference point here, I treated all my students the same. That's just me. Whether you were Māori, Vanuatuan, Chinese, English, all my students got the same treatment. In fact, some of my Māori students used to say, "Miss, I think you're racist." Māori students, why am I racist? Oh, miss, because you're giving them better treatment than us. It wasn't that, it was just everybody deserved their worlds to be unpacked. Yeah, so it shouldn't be just about Māori. It should be about every single student in your class. You should know where they live, take an interest. You should know if they play sport. You should know mum and dad. I used to invite all the parents down to whānau days. We used to have cup of tea and cake days. I'd bring the sponge cakes, the cup of tea, the school would supply the cup of tea, and we'd put all their work up on the wall. And the parents would just come through in their lunch times because most of them worked. And they would get to see their child's mahi up on the walls. It was empowering. And one father came along. He had a tear in his eye when he was reading his boy's work. He gave him a clip across the ear. And he said, "Boy, I thought you said you were dumb." But those are the neat, when we make our teaching spaces inclusive and non-discriminant, great things take place in the classroom, and great things can take place after schooling, as this video will show you. And that's the thing, if you're biased in your classes, you're going to get a student that's going to use that as motivation, and they're going to scale the heights of the world, and one day you're going to say, "Oh, hi hone," and he's going to give you that look. Ugh, I don't know why she's looking at me. She never helped me in class. So think about that. Do you want to be a part of their success? It doesn't take much. It just takes a kia ora. Oh, what are you up to? What are you doing? Yeah. How can I authenticate your world? So the motivation behind this, before I get to that, what's the key word that I would like you to take from today? If you forget about everything else that I've, talked about, when you go back to your classes tomorrow, or you're in those spaces, what's the key word? Tōku ao. Beautiful. And then, look for the mana and that personal pronoun or that adjective or that metaphor. Like I said, they've got truckloads. Okay, let's watch this video. So this was the 2020 international launch of Kātuku Island at Te Poho o Rauri Marae. After this, it went global. And like I said, we've never looked back since. We are in production of 2. It's had such an impact on the world that we have been asked by a big company overseas to join the metaverse. And that'll take me an hour to explain. But anyway, it's on the table. And these 5 guys, there's no I in team, so they are actually my business partners. And you'll see them pop up in the video. Okay, so I'm going to start it.
that we are not inadequate.
I've worked with Dot for 2 or 3 years now.
See you guys develop and become young men in your own right.
So it's going to look at resilience.
Mum and Dad built a core foundation of young fellas who have excelled and exceeded expectations. Some teachers, said that they wouldn't make it, but here they are today, making a name for themselves in the community and in our, in Aotearoa itself. So very proud of the boys, and it's it's been a good night. Very humbled to be a part of it.
A celebration tonight, but also a night to reflect on guys like Chevy and Craig who have really paved the way for us.
This game of kātuku gives that opportunity to inspire our younger generation and inspire people who would like to pursue happiness in their life, and making sure that they are able to believe in themselves, that their innovation counts.
It's wonderful, it's beautiful to see sort of steps like these being taken now by us as a people.
Ultimately, it's deep down, it's a privilege for me, bro, to be able to share part of Sue's journey, his moimoia, and be a part of helping support our rangatahi, learn these literacy and numeracy skills.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's got a bit of a taste of what's to come for the future and what we're capable of doing. Yeah.
It's a huge relief to finally to be here. All of our hard work the last 2 years and a bit. The stress levels are a little bit lower now, and proud of the boys for the mahi they've done. Proud of Miss especially, because I know she's worked harder than anyone, so just happy, relieved.
Mahi in the kitchen doesn't compare to all the mahi there she's done behind the scenes. Just happy it's all the mahi's come to fruition.
I think the game was a bonus, but I think the real treasure and I think the value of tonight was in our people and the hope and the future that we can build together when we work collaboratively and preserve our narrative, and we change the methodology so that we make organisations, governments, change the methodology to suit us, because our kaupapa, as everybody saw tonight, is different to Western frameworks. So where is our value in terms of te ao Māori? It's in people, it's in people, it's in people. E aha te mea nui I te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Note there, Kātuku looks at literacy, so you've got to, on your rhinoceros, you've got to collect all the proper nouns. There's also an adjective challenge in there, and there's also a metaphor, similarly, and onomatopeo challenges in there. And we're stage 2, we're just chucking more and more literacy at it. Survival challenges, the world loves it, everybody seems to love it. A few issues that we've got to work on in terms of the technicalities, but it's a great tool and schools are already using it and downloading it. And I, when we launched this, I had 30-year-old Māoris. Some of them were, professionals. Some of them, were just labourers, but they said, to this day, Whaia, is it bad that I don't know what a proper noun is? He said, but that was my schooling history. That's what I had to put up with. He goes, I didn't even last, But he said, I made it, but I didn't last. And I think what Kātuku Island, the powerful message behind Kātuku Island is it authenticates all those 5 young men that were on that video that spoke. It authenticated their world. Yep. Whakairo authenticated their world. And there was numerous stories where they took whakairo out. That was the only subject that they were performing in. And they took it into English. And they took it into graphic arts. Yeah. And they took it in not so much science, because they said, Miss, the science thing we just don't do. But they took it into te reo. Yeah. some of them, first time ever, they went and they undertook Māori because a lot of them were disenfranchised. But once they knew their whakapapa and their history around whakairo, and they traced their way back into their pepeha and their whakapapa, their shoulders went up. They had a knowledge base. So, in Kātuku Island, the beautiful thing about that, in summary, I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm getting close to my time limit, and maybe just if you've got a couple of pātai, but just in leaving that there, the beautiful thing about Kātuku Island is that it is about authenticating my world. Yeah, authenticating my world through a Māori lens. And remember, yes, mana orite, but remember some of our Māori students in Kura Aoraki aren't quite there yet. Yeah, they've been urbanised, they've been away from their homelands for so many years, but you need to give them that inclusive and non-discriminant space to get there. But also, what's in their vault that they already have? Yeah, don't discriminate. Whether they're gangs, whether they live in poverty, whether they've just got a solo mum at home, use it as something empowering. Because what I found from the doctorate is that when you empowered those negative codes, when you allowed those spaces to be non-discriminant and inclusive, what you did for those students is that they used those negative codes and they turned them into beneficial codes. And like I said, every single one of them got a degree. Most of them are working towards their masters. So the power behind that is it works. And don't forget about trauma. Yep. Most Indigenous people present with trauma. So I think if you have an inclusive and non-discriminant space, you're allowing for them, to make their backpack lighter. Don't make it heavier. Your aim, under this new rollout from the Ministry of Education, I think the aim of everybody should be to make that backpack lighter. So we'll end that session there. And is there anybody that just has a gnawing question that they might want to get off their chest or ask, or, I don't know, give some context? Maybe you're doing something similar in your classes that could inspire our kaiako here today. Anybody? Don't be shy now. Okay, we might leave it there. But just on my last note, as I finish, tōku au, I just want to pay privilege to Sharon White, who got me down here today. So just to let you know, tōku au my world, I don't do public speaking. I had 20 engagements this year. I only took on 2. One of them was a Huarahi Māori PPTA. The second one was here. Because tōku au, being a Māori, you move for people that inspire you. You get out of your comfort zone when you see people out there in the trenches doing their thing. And Whaia Sharon, I had the privilege, she's now with the Ministry of Education Canterbury, I had the privilege of working with her at Te Pā o Rākai Hautu. And she was the lieutenant, let me tell you. I was the soldier. Even though I was there in terms of PLD, she taught me how to be. I mean, you have those things as Māori, but I just saw her go above and beyond the call of duty for her students. There was nothing left out that she wouldn't do. You know, whether it was a bit of counselling here and there, whether it was finding a subject that they needed, you know, whether it was just checking in on them all day or having a kai with them. So it's about, I think on that, I'd just like to, finish with that and say a big mihi to her, big mihi to Te Pā o Rākai Hautu and their innovative pedagogy that I got to be a part of for a couple of years. And I understand the next wonderful speaker also comes from Te Pā o Rākai Hautu, and she's going to give her lens on her world, her tōku ao. So I'd like to mihi to her. And nō reira, tēnā rā tātou, tēnā rā tātou, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Okay, koutou. We have got a little bit out of our timeline, but we're still going to stick with us all being here. If you have booked in with a session in the afternoon and due to timing might not be able to end up in that, we will deal with that when we get there. But so far, we've got 2 more speakers. They're going to give you a little bit more of a perspective in a different way. But as already highlighted, one of the big things with the changes is, as teachers, it will be at the forefront of our mind. But there are also ākonga who are going to be affected by it. So we have invited a second speaker, who is a current student at Te Pai o Rākau Hautu, situated in the east side of our city. She is near 13. She comes to share her thoughts as the regional winner for Manu Kōrero in 2021 and 2022. So she's going to represent our region in the national stage, Manu Kōrero. She is of kaitahu and kaitahuriri whakapapa. She's a passionate speaker, and we are really privileged to welcome Sophia Walker-Clark to the stage.
When you see us, you see our tāmoko and condemn us. When you see us, you see the eyes that reflect the hate you give us when you see us. You pursue our imprisonment for your own personal benefit. You gain from our detriment when you see us. You build structures that criminalise us to create policies that discriminate against us, target our profiles and keep us from working our way up when you see us. You don't see the impact of constantly trying to fit in or achieve in settler society, and only then are we described as the good Māori. When you see us, do you really see us? You claim to see us but never really show us. Instead, you stereotype and discriminate against us, work against us and resent us. When you see us, do you really see us? From newspaper articles, media speeches, laws and regulations, constant speculations, right from when we were tricked into this colonised society, Māori have been at the forefront of harmful ideology and have had stereotypes set about who we are supposed to be. We want to be unapologetically Māori, but don't want to be labelled as the stereotypes that follow with that title or face the discrimination from our wider community. This, unfortunately, is the result of the negative portrayal of Māori people for generations. These days, a raised eyebrow and suspicion can draw a line straight to a conviction because Māori can't be seen as anything but someone destined for a jurisdiction. Māori make up 52% of the prison population, but only 16% of New Zealand's total civilization. We are a country so conditioned by racism that those most judged by skin colour and appearance end up filling up our prisons. Destined to fail before we even start. Always seen as just a bunch of typical Māori lowlifes, lazy, unreliable, no good Māori they sit there and say as they poison our communities. But we are not savages, we are not out there causing damages, we are not parodies to be used as their front page embarrassments. Stuff released an apology after journalists found openly racist front pages. A tendency to over-report on Māori child abuse cases while downplaying similar crimes of the European or Pākehā races. There were countless occasions where they simply hadn't bothered to ask the Māori community for their side of the story, siding instinctively with the more powerful white community. They don't really see us. They see the version that they have been portraying of us. If you constantly repeat and publicise everything that fits under these negative stereotypes that we are just a bunch of typical Māori lowlifes, then people will start to believe it. And as a result, we have started to believe it ourselves. To my fellow Māori, if you don't fit into this community, you are then seen as a problem. And if you want to fit in, then we have been conditioned to adjust. In doing so, we have started to ignore or suppress the parts of ourselves that don't correspond with this newfound normality. The Education Matters to Me report released in 2018 said students felt teachers treated them differently and that they were being set up to fail because they were Māori. Right from our rangatahi ages, we are being told we will never be good enough because of our cultural identity. And therefore, Māori have started to believe there is no point in trying. But when we were slandered by the media, Moana Jackson, who was widely considered one of the most influential minds shaping Indigenous rights, targeted the worst manifestation of colonisation, the criminal justice system. Despite the vicious backlash he received, he never attacked people that disagreed with him, but he never disregarded his principles either. When we were told Te Reo Māori was a dying language, Dame Naira Glavish said kia ora on the phone and nearly lost her job as a tolls operator in 1984. In a quote by Glavish, she says, "I went to work in the post office believing that the word kia ora was a salutation to this country." It was. I am kia ora is me, I am Reo Māori is me, and how could that be wrong? When we were being told our efforts would never be recognised, Dame Whina Cooper, at 79 years old, led the famous 1975 Land March from Te Hapua in the far north to Parliament in Wellington. On arriving, she presented a petition signed by 60,000 people to the Prime Minister, Bill Rowling. It marked a new era of protest and reform. And when we were being told we would never succeed as Māori, Taika Waititi won an Oscar for the Best Adapted Screenplay in 2020 for his work on Jojo Rabbit, to which he dedicated on stage in Hollywood to all the Indigenous kids around the world. As Taika Waititi said, we are the original storytellers, and we can make it here as well. All these people out there defying our labels and changing our laws, so I praise our Māori rangatira in the merit of their work. There has been countless positive outcomes due to their triumphs, including 50 years of Te Matatini and Matariki being celebrated as a public holiday for the first time this year. To the underestimated, the overlooked and the outcast, trust your power. You have generations of our people that are true success stories, and there will be many more to come. Finally, to my Māori peers. For years, our hearts and heads have been filled with self-hate and bottled up emotions. We wake up every day and face blatant judgment. Our good is never good enough for society's expected notions. But the truth is, we were never meant to fit in. In fact, we were born to stand out. So instead of trying to meet their unreachable expectations and in the process slowly lose who we are as Māori people, I challenge you to use this to your advantage. Let every negative stereotype, racist comment, biased article or politician fuel your desire to do better and be better than what they think any of us are capable of, just like many Māori have before. When you see us, do you really see us? You claim to see us but never really show us. Instead, you stereotype and discriminate against us, work against us and resent us, but we are so much more than what you see in us. E te iwi, go prove them wrong. Kia ora.
Thank you, Rangatira, for your awesome words. How powerful is our language and our oratory for us, and especially our rangatira, to be able to tell their truths. As poets, we recognise that when we take our stage, it allows us to rewrite our narratives, map our aspirations for self and for community. Stunning storytelling and words such as, when you see us, do you really see us? I am Te Reo Māori and Te Reo Māori is me. We were never born to fit in, but to stand out. Let's give our poet another round of applause. poet orator, I should say. Thank you, rangatira. The final presentation for today, actually, before we do that, we've just had some really, really rich kōrero. Can I just invite you just to take maybe 30 seconds with your neighbour, just to kind of, that awesomeness, something that has really landed or resonated for you, those 2 words, some of that, the awesome lines. Let's just take a minute or so. Feel free to stand up and stretch, and then I'm going to call you back in 30 seconds. You're right, I'll introduce you.
Talk about the hard act to follow.
That'd be great.
Yeah, they want to hear, yeah. We will get them in there.
Program in front of you, would you? Would you know? We've just got Nigel, and then we're meant to break out, but we will still break out.
Yeah, if people want to.
If it's,
standards.
Yeah, the co-represent. Yeah.
So is that
the breakout? Yeah. Until you're booked in here.
In this one? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much.
we will promote that.
No need to promote it. I feel like I'm pretty backstage.
Yeah, so in this room.
Thank you so much.
Am I or you?
Yep.
You are. Okay.
All right, kia ora whānau, if I can invite you back. The final presentation for today comes from Nigel Mitchell. You've seen him up here earlier on talking about the Level 1 pilot. Now he's back as the Learning Area Lead for English to share his understanding and ideas on mana orite mo te mātauranga Māori in English. Let's give a warm Christchurch welcome.
There was meant to be more on my PowerPoint than that. I'm not sure how to do this. I'm a Mac person. Yeah, oh, here we go. Okay, so talk about hard act to follow, and I'll try and be brief. Ko waio, ko tauhino korokio te maunga, ko Otakaro te awa, ko David Fleming te waka, no o tautahi ahau, engari ko te whanganui a tāra tuku kāinga naine. Ko Mitchell te whānau. Some of you may recognise Mitchell's furniture and burnt down. I'm going to say this joke again, apologies if you've heard it before, but my great-grandfather was a chair maker, which explains my love of sitting down. Thank you, great. Ko Mitchell te whānau, ko John Roa, ko Phyllis o ko mātua. Ko Sue toko hine. Ko Tim Roa, ko Will Oku Tama Rangatahi. I was an English teacher for 24 years or so, most recently head of English at Tawa College, and then worked for 6 years at Otago University as a PLD facilitator with people like Trish Holden, and then now I'm a public servant in the Ministry of Education, working on the review of achievement standards. And I started off working with the subject expert group, and we were lucky to start early, as I said this morning. It gave us a really good chance, and great people in the subject expert group to start developing the standards in the learning matrix. So, I mean, I think after what the two presenters we've just seen, this question is kind of redundant, really. We don't need to ask this question. Why Mātauranga Māori? The spur for the review of achievement standards with the 16,000 points of feedback we had in 2018, and the strong voice that came through that said this: we don't see ourselves in the NCEA system. And so the question was, how do we go beyond what's happening? There's a lot of really great stuff happening. We know about Taite Ako, right? We know about relational pedagogy. We know about Anne Milne. We know about all those things. We've read those. We've tried to engage in those in our classroom. But mana orite mo te mātauranga Māori goes into your pedagogical content knowledge. What is it actually that I'm teaching? And that really challenges us more deeply. And so how does the subject expert group interpret that? Well, you know, it's not a new idea. And if we pick up this, I'm going to make this slideshow available, and also there are resources on ncea.education.gov.nz if you can find them to support this stuff. And I know it's a mission, it drives me crazy, and I apologize. There is a link on this PowerPoint to where you need to go. So there are more things to support some thinking around mana orite mo te mātauranga Māori in English. And I would say at the outset that as a Pākehā, ex-Linwood High School student, Te Ara Tai, thank God it's got a new name, Linwood College, that just jarred with me. I'm not the person who made this up. There are 2 Mangai Māori in our subject expert group. There's a strong Ākonga Māori team in secondary, tertiary, and the ministry that review everything we do and give us advice. There are Mātauranga Māori expert reviewers who give us advice. Sometimes all of that advice is conflicting, but that's part of the journey we're on. And of course, then there's kaiako. So, I don't know if you've seen this before, but Linda Tuiwai-Smith's Wero to us was what we started thinking about as a subject expert group. And I'll just go through all these. I'll try not to be cute and do them one by one. But this is when books, we say books, right, but texts are dangerous. Discourse, kōrero, is dangerous in a classroom when it does these things. So if we pair them back to the keywords, good exam technique, values, actions, customs, culture and identity, authenticate my world, that knowledge, values, actions, customs, knowledge, it's a really difficult thing. The ministry's not going to define it. I'm not going to define it. It's different in different rohi, different whānau, different hapu, and that's a conversation that we need to engage in. That's, If it's only about others, it's not mana orite, it's not hearing my voice, it's not allowing Māori voice into the classroom. If it's untrue, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's about how is that text being read by that rangatahi in front of you. And a real aha moment for me as a teacher was when I was teaching boy in my year 11 class, and this student, let's call him Desmond, that was his name, said to me, I don't want to see another film about Māori failure. And I was quite struck by that. And what it made me think was, this Māori student expects me to teach a film about Māori failure. So the meaning isn't in the film, the meaning is not even in the reader, the meaning in this case was in what he expected me to teach that film to be about as a Pākehā teacher. So that was something that we tried to focus on when we built our learning matrix, when we tried to build Mātauranga Māori into the, we use this awful word, products in the ministry, but into the new NCEA. How do we authenticate his world? That was a personal response. That's a film about Māori failure. Tell me about that, Desmond. That's a personal response. That's a starting point. And so, the other thing that we picked up as a subject expert group was that the English whakatauki that we have is a really good starting point to think about big ideas for our learning matrix. Ko te reo tu tuakiri, ko te reo tōku ahurei, ko te reo te ora. If we look at the definition of those words from Te Aka, the Māori dictionary, tuakiri, obviously it's got that sense of identity, but can we see a metaphorical sense in which it's the wall of a house as well? What role does identity play in our English classrooms at the moment? I mean, I'm picking up what Phyllis has said and what's been said before, and I'm really glad actually that it picks up on what Phyllis said before, and I'm not on the wrong track. Ahure. Uniqueness, but also mana. And that's been demonstrated beautifully just now. I was wow. And ora. Translations for this went backwards and forwards, different experts telling us what we could and couldn't say, and you can see why, because there's so many different ways of looking at that word ora, and we want them all, hei iti te kupu, hei nui te whakaro, to misquote the whakatauki, apologies there. And so we tried to think about how they could turn into big ideas, or how they could support big ideas, or how they could inform big ideas. To be perfectly honest with you, and I may get in trouble for this, we didn't know what the hell a learning matrix was when we started this. You know, the science people had their idea, that didn't make any sense. So we just went with it. We just went with what we thought was going to work. And this is a draft. Some of the language isn't perfect, but the idea is there. And the way that we wanted to get mana orite was to get personal response, to get identity, to get Desmond to be able to say, I think that's a story about Māori failure, and here's why, and then we build on that. Rather than saying, well, we're going to study the film, so if you don't like it, tough. And then the significant learning stemming from those big ideas. What do we want students to learn about this? We know that it's about Māori voice. We know that it's about Māori texts, but we also know that it's about the Māori voice of the reader reading the text and what they contribute to that dialogue as they engage in it. I'm not going to read all this out to you. PowerPoint karaoke is the worst thing. You can engage in this later and have a look and have a think as a department. We've had some wonderful examples of approaches to Māori storytelling just before in the last two speakers. And I'll just give you a few more ways to think about it. So, I don't know if you teach aoe. Be brave if you did. I've seen once were warriors weaponized in the classroom. That went on for years at a school I taught in. I didn't know if I understood that at the time. I didn't want to teach it. But again, it's that I'm a Pākehā teacher. You want a Māori book? Here you go. It's a story of Māori failure. And what does that do? How does that, what does that do to that rangatahi in front of you? And how many of you have seen Apirana Ngāta's translations of Waiatamo Tiatia? Any of you? You'd have to find it in a library now. It's out of print. It'd be really good to get it reprinted. But I'm just going to pick up on a challenge from Glenn Cahoon to actually challenge yourself to look into that. There's a whole mataronga around Māori literary forms that I, for one, most of us, I don't want to speak for all of you, are completely unaware of. And it's part of Aotearoa. So Cahoon, and he's given me permission to share his keynote address at an NCEA conference in Takapuna where he talks about this, and there's a link to it on this presentation as well. I better actually go through with it, actually share this presentation. People often do that, don't they, in these things? They say, I'll make the presentation available to you, and then it disappears. But Waiata Motiata has these qualities, and they are unique. Phyllis talked about, the metaphor, the way metaphor operates, the way past and present are brought together, and why the purpose of that is unique. And he also talks about these other forms. We're working, a couple of the schools that are piloting at the moment are kupu Māori. There's a kupu Aiwi and a kura kaupapa Māori. And they, I said kupu Māori, so kura Māori. And they are really exploring that space, the extent to which you need to translate something from te reo Māori into English to make it have a place in an English program. It's a really interesting space for us to navigate at the moment, but they are finding that it's really unlocking their kids' ability to use meta-language about the things that they just do every day. And to understand that rich, what was the word that Phyllis used, that rich store of metaphor, simile, all of those things that they just use. And they say, but Whaia, we just use this stuff, we don't need to talk about it. And that's really exciting for them, and for me as well. Well, yeah. Oh, is this for me? So yeah. And so I'm going to wind up now because I sort of raced through this because you've been you've been a wonderful audience. And so there's some things you can click on. There's some other sort of resources that I made to support Teacher Only Days last year, but teachers didn't click on them because you were too busy with real life. And I totally understand that. In fact, that's really good for me because it means I've got all these resources I can share at things like this. So there you go. You can click on that. You don't have to do 48 clicks to get to it. There's Glenn Cahoon's essay. I really urge you to read that. It's really challenging. It's really not challenging. It's really inspiring. Professor Tai Arahia Black's analysis of Te Koho Ki Ohiwa really gives you an idea of how you can do a literary analysis of a Māori text and understand that different purpose and audience, how it functions into our Māori and why that's so important. And then there's a link to a Witi Ihimara story thing on Radio New Zealand too that I just add there for you to explore in your own time. How did I do? That's not too bad. And then, what is your school's connection with local hapu, local iwi in your rohi? How is that, as a school, what does that look like? And how can you as an English department fit into it? I know Kaitahu have done a lot of work. I used to work, when I worked for Otago University, we shared the contract with Te Tapoia Rehua, as it was then. They're called Tokono Taraki now, Kaitahu. So I'm quite lucky to have been able to travel around the Kaitahu rohi and hear from them. And I know they do a lot of work to support education, but don't give them a call and say, what can you do for me? Give them a call and say, what can we do for you? I don't know why I'm so breathless. Perhaps I'm having a heart attack. I'll leave you with that. Thank you for giving me the chance to give you that little insight. I'll be around for the day if you want to pick my brains or ask me any challenging questions or whatever. I put my email address at the front of that presentation, so hopefully you didn't get a chance to write it down. And I just want to also mihi to Waitaha English for making this event possible. What a brilliant Teacher Only Day. It's been the best ever. Kia ora.
Yes, definitely. You good? Yeah. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Thank you for attending today's hui. Hopefully you have gained a lot. You've had a chance to connect with different kaiako that you haven't seen potentially. COVID's definitely interrupted everyone's lives. We as a committee are really proud to have been able to deliver such a wide range of voices. There are still more to come. So with that session breakout, session 2, we do have Dr. Margaret Franken here to run numeracy and literacy discussion. We have Dr. Phyllis here as well if you have any questions. So if you are able to stay for a little bit longer, I think we've only blown out the timeline, maybe 20 minutes. If you are able to stay and attend those breakout sessions, if you haven't signed up for something and now you're really inspired to go and talk to someone about what you've learned, ask a few more questions, we are still going to run those. But we're going to conclude as a group here together now. So before we do that, we have a few final messages.
Just want to say thank you to everyone that was involved in putting this together. A big whawhate te lava to Burnside High School for hosting us, the teachers who shared in the first breakout sessions, ngā mihi to all our guest speakers. Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you for the great wisdom, knowledge and wero that have been thrown down on our proverbial mat. A big whawhate te lava too to the Ministry of Education. I want to acknowledge one of our chiefs in the audience, Foita Nose Nafo, Laura and Joseph, who've been working hard behind the scenes, and the Principals Association for their kindness in keeping us well fed.
And as a final plug, this is the way that you can connect with Waitaha English. As a representative of the committee, we are small, but we are really excited to see what can be done. We have so much more to come, so if you aren't a member of our association, if things have lapsed, as treasurer, I have invoices ready to send out, $80, and there's so many more PD opportunities to come. Our success as a committee comes from your attendance and your participation. We are there to work with you. You are here to work with us, hopefully. One thing that we are hoping that you will be watching out for is we are planning the next big day out. So this Accord Day, the sessions that you have been in, they were the start of conversations. It is hard to get the recipe for the perfect classroom in one day. So we are planning it, and we're really keen to get your voices in that process. So if you are connected to Instagram, on Facebook, like, follow, we will be updating there, and there are more to come. So that is our final messages. I want to thank Daisy here, who take on co-hosting with me. She helped a lot. She is also one of our lovely facilitators who will be hanging out in her space. So if you can, please stay, visit those people, ask those questions. It's the opportunity to do it in person instead of sending an email that gets lost. And can I have everyone here too for our final karakia? Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I roto. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa. Hone, huie, tākie. Okay, so you may head out from here if you are going to one of the sessions and you don't know where. All the rooms are on the main board. Margaret Franken is in this room. Ka kite anō. So this is our little sign of appreciation.
That's okay, I haven't done it yet.
I know, but we just want to give it to you before I run off to run a session. And yeah, we have some people keen, so hopefully they'll hang around. Okay.